Hello, everyone. I think you can hear me. Yes, I will be doing this session with Ben. You will see us on the stage together. But before we start, what I wanted to do is that I think it's very important to speak. Why are we focusing even on climate adaptation? Why is this something that we need to be looking at? Because as tourism, we haven't focused a lot on it. And is the presentation up? No, this is not the first slide. This is not the first slide, so here we are. Okay, so this is things that we are talking about. However, we are maybe missing some parts. So we're talking about sustainability. We heard about net zero. We heard about the carbon emissions. We heard about decarbonization. Just before, we heard about the SDGs. We heard about the importance of AI. The first session talked about sustainable aviation fuel. We also heard from net zero to net positive, and then how we are focusing on mitigation, how we are trying to make the Earth not become hotter than it is, how we are all getting together, setting targets, saying by 2030, this is our agenda to be net zero as an industry, be the aviation, be the hotels. We heard it before, some very ambitious hoteliers from Radisson saying we want to have net zero hotels. But honest reaction, raise your hand if you believe that we are on target. If you believe that as an industry, we're managing to reach these targets that we have set by 2050 or by 2030. Please raise your hand if you say we are on track. One? Okay, so we have one, two. We have two people that say that we are on track. Unfortunately, we heard it yesterday from Lawrence, so I will not repeat the same things. We had the bad news on we are not on track, and we know what will happen by 2050. And what will happen by 2050 is already written and set in stone. What we are just discussing is whether we will make it worse or not. This is where we're at. And because working with this type of data that we did not used to do before as tourism, with satellite data, with anyone who is climate scientist here? Raise your hand. I'm not. We have one who somehow is, okay? All right, so here it's a tourist conference with one that somehow is a climate scientist. However, this is the area that tourism needs to collaborate with in order to respond to the challenges that we have. And this is important because we need to adapt to what is coming, because we know that it's coming, but we need to adapt before it comes. And when we're thinking about investments, for example, you never do an investment for 1 year or for 5 years ahead. When you do investments, you look into 10 years or 20 years. We are just 25 years before 2050, and we know what will happen by 2050. And I will just give you two examples of what we see happening in a destination, and then how other destinations are trying to adapt to it. So this is the first one. Anyone knows from the map where we are? We are in Andalusia, we're in Spain, right? So what you see here is what is happening right now. This is the present. So in the present, what you see as more reddish shows how many heat waves, each one lasting for 3 days, that it's from 38 degrees and above, we are experiencing today. So climate science has different scenarios, and I will use two of them now to show you. One says that what will happen by 2050 if we manage to mitigate a little bit more than what we do now, and what will happen by 2050 if we do not manage to mitigate. So first scenario, if we manage to mitigate, by 2050, this will be the heat waves in Andalusia. So here you see how much greater the impact is in Córdoba and Sevilla, and this is if we manage to do some of the mitigation. And if we don't, even worse. So this is what expects, what we should be facing as destination planners, as decision makers, as the ones who want to secure a sustainable future. But who is doing something? Does anybody work on it? And the answer is yes. And I will just give you one of the examples of the work that we do. And here is how we are dealing with these issues. We need to adapt to the new seasonality that we will experience. We also need to work on the redistribution of the tourism flows. You saw before that some areas will be heavily impacted, but some areas would not. And that means that we need to redistribute the tourism flows to the areas that will not be so much impacted. On the other hand, we might need different product development, because during the very, very hot months, maybe indoor experiences will be more important to sustain the tourism flows that we have today in the future. So we are going to have issues of health and crisis management. We will have the need to tailor the marketing activities that we have, and also who we are attracting, because maybe as a destination during certain times of the year, we will need to attract a different source market than what we do now. And in general, how do you plan for it? We need to start planning for it now, because the adaptation process, it's long. The investment that it will require, it's a lot. So we need to have a plan that says, today I'm here, tomorrow I need to do this, the day after I need to do that. In a year or in 2 years, I need to have achieved that place, until we reach 2050, where we know what is happening, but we want to be resilient by 2050. And an example here that I want to show you is Prince Edward Island in Canada. And I'll be in Canada in 2 weeks' time to present one of our works that we do there. So here are some KPIs that we're looking into. It's not only the rising temperatures. We're looking into post-tropical storm, heavy precipitation and flooding, coastal erosion, heat waves, what does it mean to have a longer, warmer season and a shorter winter season, especially if you're thinking about destinations that might be more wintry, right? What does that mean? Wildfire and smoke, sorry. And we are the stage where we will present the risk and how we calculate the risk. We see the likelihood of an event happening and what is the consequence of that event. And together we understand what is the risk. And on the risk, then of each different climate KPI that you see, we have to contrast it with the different industries in tourism that we have. So how much a risk of wildfire will impact accommodation, or a tour agent, or a tour operator, or the marketing activities that we do, or where the people are coming from, or the health system that we need to have, or the crisis response. So as a tourism industry, each one of these climate indicators will need to be filtered from all of our fragmented sector. So I will leave it here, because then I have Ben, who is also working on the topic, and we will gonna have a very interesting discussion. Yesterday we bonded very well, so I'm looking forward to it.
Thanks, Nico. Yeah, we met yesterday, and it was good fun at the gala. So, I mean, I'm meant to be responding to what you just said, and I think, firstly, it might just also be worth asking the audience. So, the first question was, how well do you think we're doing in terms of mitigation? Are we going to be able to reach those 2050 targets? I think if I could ask another question, which is, how many people here already think that climate change is affecting tourism and affecting themselves, maybe even in tourism? So I think that's just the other thing to kind of flag here is that, and I think you did that with, even showing, Spain today. We are having these, weather events, and they are impacting on us. They're impacting on our own decisions in terms of where we want to travel. They're also impacting on the destinations themselves, the people who live in those places. And so this is an issue that we can take seriously now for today, as well as to plan for the future as well. So I think that's kind of just something to emphasize. I think the other thing that we've discussed before is, I guess there's differences in the room here in terms of your situations. For some of you, you might have businesses where you can choose which countries, which destinations you send your clients to. Some of you might be more heavily based in a place. It might be your speciality to focus on a particular area. Some of you may be based fully in a place with your own assets in that place. You have sort of physical presence in that place. And that difference will sort of matter in terms of how you see the future and the threat of climate change. And so I think it's kind of helpful to kind of understand that. And we've sort of discussed how, certainly for destinations that are planning their own tourism, adaptation is far more important in a way than mitigation. I think that the control that you have in terms of how you manage tourism as a destination is much more around how you will develop tourism for the future than it is maybe about the impacts that you can have on greenhouse gases. I mean, that's not to take away the huge importance of mitigation, of course, but I would probably, if I wanted to, I'd put that much more onto the businesses and potentially the international businesses, potentially the airlines, potentially the et cetera. I put that, that's where those guys have to focus really. For destinations, I think it should all be about, well, nearly all about adaptation. And of course, as part of adaptation, you've got to be thinking about your exposure to high risk, high carbon activities. So it kind of still ties into the idea that you need to move away from those sorts of bits of tourism. And just one more thing before we get down to, because I think we've got some questions then. Nico kind of mentioned this really useful way of understanding risk here. He's given some hazards there, some example hazards, this formula of how you understand what risk is. We've been doing some work around risk too, trying to develop a methodology with some universities in Holland, and also Risk Layer, which is a kind of risk consultancy. I think I find it really useful when we understand it as the assets of a place that are at risk. So if you are, I don't know much about this Prince Edward Island, I'm afraid, but it's an island, so it probably has beaches. Maybe people go to the beaches here. I don't know if that's true.
They do.
Okay, so they're at risk.
It's a summary destination of Canada.
Okay, great. I should do more research. So these are assets that are at risk. And so that's possibly the most obvious one for us as tourists, tourism industry, right? We know that, we sell the place, and if some of the assets in that place are going to be at risk in the future, you won't have that coastline in the same way as you have it now. That's maybe the most obvious one that we can get to understand. The other one is the operations, and again you mentioned those. So the operations, how will it affect the workforce? Will you still have a workforce in 2050? Will they be willing and able to come to you for the tourism that you're offering? What will your supply chain be like? Will it be robust or will it be fragile? There will be issues there. What will the costs be like? I don't think people are thinking about that. It's like the costs are going to go up. Tourism costs will go up. It will cost more to travel. It will cost more to insure. And people aren't really kind of factoring that in. Is your future tourism viable when costs go up? And then the last point really is the one that you mentioned as well around demand and maybe competitiveness compared to other destinations. And just thinking that through, because clearly, you're going to have to think, I would say here that anyone who's growing their long-haul travel, I would ask you, maybe you should reconsider that high-risk strategy. So let's think about, where will the demand come from in the future for your tourism that you're developing, and how will your destination compare to others that your audiences will be thinking about? But that's just to echo what you said, really, Nico.
So how about we take a...
Yeah. Now I'm going to interrupt this a little bit because we're going to break this up in the spirit of Eric yesterday, who I thought was auditioning for a Saturday night TV show as a host. We're going to now do a kind of TV quiz show because Laurie, our great producer, has come up with a series of questions. These two guys don't know what the questions are. If you believe that, you'll believe anything. But anyway, I'm going to throw them randomly at you, and you have to
down,
answer.
yeah.
Do you want to sit down?
Yep.
Yeah.
Where should we go?
So, the first question is, to each of you, please provide 2 concrete examples across these contexts. Either coastal erosion coastal erosion and rising sea level, mountains/winter sports destinations, heat waves and/or wildfires, flooding and water management. And I'm going to ask Nikos to start, please.
All right, so this was everything in one question. But I will take the coastal erosion because it is what we saw before with Prince Edward Island. So the coast is being, of course, becoming impacted because of the rising sea level, and also it's being eroded. So what happens if you're a summer destination, that this is one of your main assets for tourism development? So your coast is at risk, right, as a tourism asset. So when it is at risk, then you have to see, okay, how do I adapt to it? Can I stop the coastal erosion? The answer is no. You cannot really stop the coastal erosion. But from a tourism development perspective, what do we need to do? Where is the opportunity for us to pivot? And here is the challenge that the Prince Edward Island is now facing, because it says, okay, our coast is not that it's not going to disappear, but of course it's not going to be at the same level as we have it. So how we create the right tourism product and the right tourism experiences for the summer travelers that will be coming to us. And it's becoming even more important because the summer traveler is going to have more time to go to Prince Edward Island, because the warmer season is becoming longer and the winter season is becoming shorter. So there is an understanding that more travelers will be coming. Infrastructure needs to be there to support more travelers. Considerations of what will happen if by 2050 I have more travelers coming to Prince Edward Island. That means that I need to be thinking of issues like maybe overcrowding in Prince Edward Island, something that it's not an issue at the moment. But here we're discussing about a destination that it's more of I have a risk, but then it can turn to an opportunity. What happens if you're a winter destination and then suddenly you don't have snow? Here you need to pivot completely. But I'll leave it to that and give you some space. But.
Okay, because I will choose a winter one. But just first, just to kind of complement that example, I mean, sometimes there are things you can do to try to stop coastal erosion, nature-based solutions. So I expect many of you will know that Iberia Star has their Wave of Change program, and as part of that, I think they use 1% of the revenue from their coastal hotel stock, and they put that into things like reef restoration, mangrove restoration, seagrass, that sort of thing. And what I particularly like about that is that, yeah, they're doing that because it's a nice thing to do, but they're also doing it because they see the investment. They've worked out that if they put that investment in now, then the payback, is worth it. There are benefits there. They're even looking to see if they can connect that to insurance, to see if they can reduce their insurance costs based on this investment they have. But going back to winter, so we're working at the moment with 3 ski and winter destinations: the Dolomites in Italy, Colorado state, and also Queenstown in New Zealand. And we're doing something that's a very similar process to what you set out there. I'm trying to understand the future, understand the risks, and put that into tourism context so that people in tourism can actually feel like you can do something about it. Because like you say, you can't, if you're working in tourism, you can't particularly change the fact that climate is going to change. But and maybe you can't put in flooding barriers, and that's not really down to you, right? But what can you do? Clearly, in these places, the snow is the issue, and if you're below a certain height, then really your sort of days are pretty much numbered from a ski perspective. But what's really useful here is that you can, these places are already trying to diversify. They're already trying to think about things like, mountain biking runs and that sort of thing, and sort of wellness experiences in the summertime and that sort of thing. If they can see the direction of travel, then this makes them feel much more confident that they should be investing in those things in the future. Now, for the future. Because, still now, skiing will be the most profitable sector for these places. It's kind of essentially their cash cow still, and so it's very difficult for them to sort of adapt, because this is where the revenue's coming from at the moment. But if they can see that investment in something that may seem small and insignificant at the moment will become, is basically pushing the right direction of travel, then I think that will give them much more confidence in marketing, in the investment, to make these things happen. So I think that's a good example.
But Rajan, who was before in the last year's session of A World for Travel? Please raise your hand. Of course, Christian. Okay. So what happened last year? We had Laurence saying the same thing, and then two panels later, it was all about snow tourism and the investors of how they're investing, like with a 10 years time, how they're investing on snow resorts. And then Laurence was saying we will not have snow in 10 years in places in the world, in some places of the world. Therefore, I think the main question for these destinations, even if they're winter destinations, is for how long will you be able to keep with the tourist product and any investment and revenue that comes with that, and how you direct your efforts on not only product diversification, but also the infrastructure necessary to support the different product diversification. Because you might, if you don't have snow, you might need to create different type of infrastructure to support different type of product for the travelers. So it's complicated, what I want to say.
And it's the long-term investment.
Exactly.
That's where you start to see it. We're already seeing some hotel chains saying that they are not investing in places like Greece because they're concerned about the heat and the future. And I haven't really seen much evidence that the investment is dropping from some, so clearly some, particularly in France, actually, some ski resorts are closing and already have closed. But in elsewhere, I think the investment is still coming, but I think it's time-bound for, I think people see it as one more generation, basically. One more, we will get something out of this. We will make our money, but then, we will hand on to something else.
Okay. Time is short, so I'm going to ask you to rattle through these answers a little bit quicker, if you don't mind, just so we can cover all the...
Sorry, we're passionate about the topic.
Just so we can cover all the aspects. So the next question is about cultural dimensions. Does climate change and our responses to it affect the culture and identity of a destination's people? How do adaptation strategies interact with local heritage, tradition, and sense of place?
Will you go? Yeah.
All right. So the issue that we need to think here is the cultural erosion. So not only coastal erosion at the moment that we discussed before, but also there is an element of cultural erosion that might happen just because of some places suddenly becoming slightly more difficult to live in. And some others will be completely uninhabited. We discussed about some of the islands that will be under the sea, etc. So anything that existed there will have to migrate somewhere else. And there is a big risk of losing, of course, part of the heritage, be that tangible and intangible. Now, if we divide culture in tangible culture, so you will have the monuments, the statues, etc., they are, of course, impacted as buildings, as materials, as structures that exist, they're impacted by the climate change, the climate developments. But when it comes to the intangible part, the way that we interact with this change, this is whether we will manage to adapt, that's great, and we will manage to secure and continue living in the way and secure the cultural aspects that we have. But if we do not manage to adapt to it and we are more responsive to something that happens instead of us preventing, then parts of the culture, of our intangible culture, would need to be lost in order to abruptly adapt to what has happened.
I understand.
Can I make a tiny... as you said before, every risk has an opportunity. And I'm kind of waiting to see, maybe they're out there, and I'd love to hear your examples of them if you've got them, audience. But the stories of adaptation, there'll be some amazing stories of engineering. There'll be some, amazing stories of, if you think about even the wine regions here in France, how they are adapting and how they are bringing out new wine varieties. These are stories of hope and of communities, which I think we should sort of celebrate. We all want to understand these challenges and find how we will secure this great future that we so desperately want to have, right? So I think there's a positive side to it too.
Okay, last question, because we're running out of time. It's about the opportunity cost of inaction. So what are the economic and social costs if destinations fail to adapt? How could inaction reshape global tourism flows or accelerate climate-related displacement? So what are the costs of not taking action?
I think there are several, but I'll try to be very brief and tell you that there is an opportunity for you to take on now. But what will happen if we don't act now? So if we don't act now, we should expect that we will be vulnerable towards all of this climate risk as a tourism sector. We wouldn't have had the processes ready to react and adapt to what is coming. We wouldn't have secured the investments necessary. And I want to be clear, destinations across the world will be very competitive in order to secure these investments globally and try to reallocate these funds. So if you are one of the destinations that is the last one to join the party, then you're going to have less resources. And we're going to have a very big social risk of our communities not being able to have the economic value that tourism gives them now. And this is something that we don't want to do, especially for destinations that are very much dependent on tourism.
Ben, last word.
So just two things then. One is for every pound or euro you spend on preventative measures or adaptation and resilience, they tend to say that it will deliver 10 pounds or euros or dollars back within 10 years. And that's really, again, we talked about sort of solid research before. That's, there's many bits of research that sort of say the same thing. That's from the World Resource Institute, but there's many others. So I think we can say that's a truth. The other thing is just climate justice as an issue here, because if we don't act, it's going to be the most vulnerable communities that suffer, those that don't have the options to change. It's not that they are choosing to stay doing what they're doing now, it's that they don't really have the options to do anything else. And it's quite stark, really, if you look at where the main, if we're talking about unviable tourism, it's the global south, really quite clearly on the map. And if we don't think about providing a just transition for these communities and give them a livelihood for the future, then we're going to be in some serious trouble.
And these are economies, aren't they? The small islands, the little countries, whose economies are totally dependent, virtually totally dependent on tourism.
And bigger countries.
And bigger countries too, yeah, quite. All right, well, I'm sorry to cut it short, but we've got to move on. Can you please thank Ben and Nikos?